Hello, this is Mjfontaine from Mjfontaine, and welcome to the Creative Pioneer interview. And today I have the amazing photographer, creative director, so many other names to this person, which I'll allow him to explain. Clive Kofi Allen.
Thank you, Marilyn. How are you saying? Hello, folks, and thank you for having me on your show.
Good. It's really, for me, it's really important that you come on here. We've been meaning to do this for some time. So, what I want you to do is just let us know what exactly do you do in terms of your business.
Where do I begin? That's the question.
Exactly.
Yeah, many moons ago, probably going back 25 years, I discovered the camera. Mm-hmm. And that's where it began for me in terms of starting to realize that there's another way to engage, the creative world. It wasn't something that was taught to me at school. Mm-hmm. In that respect. It wasn't something that was given to me as an option. It was something that actually I discovered through, being very, very inquisitive and stumbling across a camera. From then, I had to go through tremendous amount of hurdles to get to where I am today. Right. So initially, everyone would know me as a photographer, mm-hmm. and I think that's a massive part of my development. Going into other areas which I've now diversifying. So I do photography, a lot of photography. Mm-hmm. Worked a lot within the music industry, facilitated on tremendous amount of projects, some really cool projects. Be creative direction, be consultation, be art directing and stuff like that. But ultimately, for me, I like to bring it home. Mm. I came from the analog era of photography, so there was no digital screens and stuff like that. Which it took me a while to get my head around it. But now I got best of both worlds. Right. Do you know what I mean? And then the work progressively got into the fine art arena. Okay. Again, I'm a reluctant artist in that respect, so I'm a bit modest about people calling me an artist. But it's interesting owning that space because you realise that that's part of the journey to understand the humility of letting go, right, to progress. Right. Do you know what I mean? So that was another part of the program. So a lot of works now featured in sort of global galleries. We have stuff in the National Portrait Gallery. The Hayward, right. Do you know what I mean? We did stuff in the South Bank, you know what I mean? We've toured, literally internationally. Wow. And then, the most important thing now is about looking at the archive I've created and how we can use that to leverage, towards the future generation as well as new work that I'm going to be creating. Okay. Do you know what I mean? And in the meantime, I direct, and I'm now exploring a few other avenues, which is more on the business side of things, because I want to also get behind and empowering artists to become self-sustainable. Right. Wow. Because you've used different mediums. You've used video, you've used photography, but your photography is not just what I would call just standard photography, even though you've worked with major magazines and, Yeah. I mean, the thing is, what's interesting is that my journey into the media industries has been slightly different, I think, from most people's, and partly that's due to my own personality, and partly is just because I was not kind of like from that privileged sector initially, so I had to fight to get in, fight to own my identity. Yeah. So throughout that whole journey, I started off being, the photographer just wanted to be the greatest photographer. Okay. Every artist wants to be the greatest they can be. But then I realized I was kind of like getting lost in my own vanity of that idea. Right. And it was Kate Garner. I know Kate Garner. She wrote an article once, and I think it was in the Sunday Times, and it was just relating to how black photographers were very afraid of documenting their own communities, and they had this kind of research on this, and the stats were pretty factual. But beyond that, I looked at my portfolio, which was really diverse actually. But really, I was still aspiring beyond something that I'm not. Not saying that we should limit ourselves to just our communities. No. But I wanted to I couldn't see the identity shift in the world I was in. And I thought she was really on point, even though I was a bit peed off, because when you're a black photographer doing that kind of work, you kind of get pigeonholed. Yeah. So you play with a double-edged sword, whereas if you're a white photographer doing that, you are somewhat elevated, you become super cool, super fly, you're the guy. And I'm like, well, that ain't right either. So ultimately, I had to make a decision. Yeah. And I'm going home looking at my work, I'm thinking, well, actually, I'm just a photographer. I'm a visual artist. I'm a visionary, and I never really saw it in black and white.
Yeah.
You know, but actually, if you put it into that context, and I was to die tomorrow, you know, fingers crossed, I still live. But if I die tomorrow, what would be my story? What would be my contribution? How would I have actually, you know, deterred anything that I could have done differently? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I decided that I was going to use that camera and explore, you know, what do we look like outside of the mainstream?
Right. Yeah.
You know, and then also what the other cultures look like outside of the mainstream.
Yeah.
So again, it was not, you know, restricted to or limited to either way or course. It was actually about, you know, how do I explore and expand my repertoire? And then fundamentally, I found a whole new sensation of vibes within my work, within, you know, printing in the dark room, within, you know, how I approached a subject, within how I saw light. I went into the microcosm of understanding the principle of lighting, all right, before I even got into, you know, the idea of the cameras and the lenses. And I never was the guy with the big camera and the big lens. I would work humbly with whatever I had available. Okay, so then later when I kind of really could afford or could hire in particular equipment. So I would always say to artists, never get too bogged down with all the what you think you need to have to actually achieve that element of, you know, engagement, you know, because the idea is worth more if you think about it.
So it comes, for me, it shows in your work when you see the finished product, because it seems like there's some kind of transformation that's taken place, and it's not just through the electricals, you know, the camera, you know, the material. It's something that's happened through the process. It feels to me. So, you know, I see some of your images and there's specific, you know, tricks of light, certain colours. You know, the effects are slightly different. So for me, I see that you've used the process more than the actual equipment.
Yeah. Well, I think you know, I think because I'm not coming with the working from inside the box. Yeah. Yeah. Having worked inside the box, you know, I've actually enjoyed walking around the edges. Okay. And actually sort of like realizing that actually there's probably more sides than just four. Yeah. Because if you turn it around, it becomes a bit more three-dimensional. And then you start looking at it from another perspective. You realize that it's got sort of depth and scope. Yeah. And then, you know, you start looking at how can you transcend that thought. And, you know, initially it's born out of frustration. Because, you know, they said necessity is the mother of invention. Yeah. Yeah. And I stick fast to that. Do you know what I mean? So pre-Photoshop, I was kind of always seen in sort of multiple dimensions, or 3 or 4 dimensions, in terms of how I see you in a conversation. You know what I mean? We're having a superficial conversation, but at the same time, you know, there's another conversation. There's some subtext to the conversation. You know what I mean? And then there's the agenda to the conversation. You know what I mean? So, you know, that to me is like, I could just listen to you superficially and be happy with that, and, you know, go about my business, or I could actually listen to that conversation and think, actually, you know what, that was interesting, because, you know, she engaged me in various ways and how that was done, and that made me feel kind of like I can open up here, you know. And technically, that is all part of the process. You know, preceding digital, the engagement of photography was based on alchemy. Right. You know what I mean? And I've always adhered to the idea of light and photosynthesis. Okay. So there's parallels running between the idea of the photosynthesis, photography, photosynthesis, life, and there's an interesting relation that used to happen. Yeah. So I've always kept to that spirit or that soul within my work. Do you know what I mean? And then to transcend that into digital, that was harder work. Yeah, it must be different. It's quite interesting, because how was it difficult for you? Because it goes to my next question about how important it is for you to have creative control. Well, I mean, creative control is one thing. I think it's difficult when you are in the middle of the road. So, like, for me to transcend into digital, I had to walk that middle of the road for nearly 2-3 years, and it felt like you was in no man's land. Okay, so that's a real journey. Like I'm telling you, I'm like, oh, do I go there? You know, I mean, do I use that microwave to cook my food, or I like my oven, I like the smells, I like the seasoning, but the ready-made pack is there, and you can get it now. So you know, you had to put it into context. You know, because I knew how important it is to me to have artistic control, and I think how important is it for me to be playful. to create, and still be in control of letting it happen.
Right.
So again, it's like, again, music is a really massive passion of mine.
Yeah.
And the best music I've ever hear is when when the jazz band, for instance, are just warming up and it sounds like a lot of noise.
But they're coming together.
And the orchestra, and they go off in a preamble, you know what I mean? But then automatically, no conductor even, they just synchronize.
Okay.
And you find that there's a synergy to the harmony. There was a journey in the first place, and you trusted ourselves to get there. Yeah. And that's part of the process for me in art and photography.
Right.
And photography is my catalyst. It's not the beginning. It's not the end. It's not the beginning or the end. Actually, it's the middle part of my process.
It's really interesting because what you're describing there to me is that part of you surrenders to something, and it's almost. Do you have how much of that process is intuition? And how much is it experience?
Well, I don't know. Guys can have intuition, right? I mean, here's your debate. Can we have intuition? Does men have intuition? And no, well, this is important. I mean, look, I've had this argument within the intellectual arenas, and we've had it amongst my peers who's working from within the abstract art space to photographers to filmmakers, and amongst the peers, we all agree, like intuitively, it's where it's most significant. Yeah. However, it's least spoken about. Yeah. It's very much, in a calculus or in a reference to something. And I'm like, well, then it's not for me. It's not what it's about. I mean, I like it. If I'm inspired, I'm inspired.
That's
but fundamentally, I mean, that no two people are alike. Yeah. Even if they're twins, they're not alike. So when I'm working, I mean, I can have similar processes to engage something. But I like to allow things to happen, sometimes to my detriment, but majority of the time, is to create something that's unique.
So when you're working with somebody, I mean, you've done quite a bit of what we would call celebrity photography, and when you're directing or taking direction, is your intuition that informs you to actually change, like you're going for a project and you feel a need to just change up the whole scene. Has that happened before? And your intuition that allows you to...
Yeah, I mean, it happens in too many different ways. Yeah. I mean, it's so weird. Like, I've been on sets where I've had it all, pre-production, meetings. And that's really important because that helps to get the technological stuff in some kind of alignment. But I want to do it so that I can be free to run rain and to have adaptation. So my producer... or my first AD or second AD or whatever will be like, oh, but that wasn't in the script, Kofi, why are you adding that shot to that? But actually, why not? Yeah, because that's where it's taking me. Yeah. And if we are here, either a part of a team or within the creative sphere, then surely we need to go with that. And you may set something up for a client that really had this, thought it's going to work because on paper it sounded good, but actually when they were there, they could have a bad day. They may want to adapt something. So I always kind of leave myself open to that adaptation because I think life is never so static and rigid. Unless you're getting paid as, 20 grand a day by an advertising agency, then you're like, okay, I'll come and do that picture. But that is not necessarily, and even if I did that, all right, there's a subtext to my story. Yeah. So I often worked because I couldn't really afford to do art for art, privilege sake, in terms of, you need to have particular things, workshops, you need to have, a kind of a committed sort of, story time plan and everything. So I used the commercial vehicle. Right. So I've always had that conversation with understanding a commercial remit and then how to go beyond that commercial remit. So then when I revisit my work, my soul's in there still. Doesn't mean I've done them short if I give them more than they often required. So when I went back to that, I can then take a layer off and then expand on that. Right. Do you know what I mean? So that the idea was that the work didn't just kind of end on the poster or on the magazine or on the consumer sort of end user. It actually has another conversation that once revisited, it expands into a much broader territory. Right. And for me, that's key. That was key for me. It's like, the difference between pop music and soul music or jazz or punk or, you realize that, some music are intended just to be hitting the chart. Right. Not necessarily you're going to go back and play that to your children. Yeah. Or you're going to keep that as an heirloom, or you have to revisit that when you have a certain emotion. Right. And for me, I've been so tight with music and the energy of how that can influence and adapt to people and people adapt to it. I see my work in a similar precept, and I've always aspired to that.
Right.
You know, I'm not saying I achieve it all the time, but you know, hopefully, you know, from your feedback or other people's feedback, the work itself, you know, it has something in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, and I think that space between, and I always use this, so people please bear with me. That space between the tick and the talk, is my indelible space. It's the thing you can't measure.
Right.
You know, and I think we all have that space between the tick and the talk. So you know, people, you know, other people say that's the funk, you know, or that's the hip and the hop, you know, or that's the jive.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is that is then devalued.
Right.
It's, you know, put in an urban space, and I'm like, forget that. You know, that is actually invaluable.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, so when I'm working with, you know, a subject matter, doesn't matter what level we're working from. You know what I mean? You know, it could be, you know, from the musical space, an art creative space, an actress performance space. It could be just me and land space. I'm still working in that. I'm aspiring to that space.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because I think that's something with me that I'm imparting, and I think, you know, if we can get that, if I can transcend that, and you know, find a way to convey it, then it's, you know, it opens up dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I want that reflection of the work after that is not longer mine. It's actually yours, because you're the one who are engaging in that work. So you know, I'm mindful of that.
And it's funny because your experiences obviously reinformed your decisions, isn't it? So every piece of work you do, the experience reinforms that. But also,
sometimes.
you know, it's true, isn't it?
No, it's no. I mean, you know, it is true. It is true.
You've got the portfolio to show it, haven't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, the good thing about photography is that it creates a trail. So you kind of see the journey that you're on. So even if you're in a low curve,
you can see.
You know, you can go back and see that actually, you know what, I thought I was really, you know, on something, but really what that was telling me there, that I was really going through, you know, an emotion, or you know what I mean. It's interesting. So yeah, very much so.
So okay, so it's kind of, and I always say sometimes when we take on specific jobs and job roles, it allows us to be disciplined in one way or another. You know, because sometimes if you're just going down a creative route, it's all different directions, where sometimes when you have to take on jobs that may or may not suit your vision, they actually give you something else. So they actually give you a discipline of budgets, deadlines, you know, preparing you for something bigger.
No, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. I mean, the thing is about the way art is perceived in itself is, you know, is kind of like it's been dumbed down a little bit in a business sense, you know, because it's not often measured as a responsible role. Yeah. You know, which means, you know, we're not just being consistent about, you know, 9 to 5 or something like that, but actually, you know, it's actually how to kind of collaborate or how to co-create. You know, in how would you phrase this? In kind of in chaos. You know, so when things are not working out, you know, you find a creative person may just sit back and think, actually, but you know, we've already thought of something. Because we kind of play with that a lot, and you know, and other people have some really good administrative skills, you know, to, you know, process these applications and to be really about attending surgeries and all the other things you do, which often are not really the forefront of the creative, but it's all part of the process. So I mean, I've got tremendous transferable skills.
Okay, well, we can see that actually, just how your work is adaptable and, you know, and changed. But what discipline do you have that allows you to do this kind of work?
You know, I mean, is it a discipline? I mean, some people call it a stubbornness. You know, some people call it like resilience. Yeah. You know, some will be like, you know, my discipline is actually stillness. Yeah. If anything, you know, my discipline is really about, you know, despite what you may think life has fed you or thrown at you or challenged you with, that, you know, there is an objective. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And photographically is one way to transcend it. But if I lost my camera tomorrow, heaven forbid, then I'm going to find another way to transcend that. You know? So my discipline is, you know, using my senses, you know, listening and looking, you know, and really trying to absorb and then, you know, transcend. So like I said, the same thing with photosynthesis and alchemy. It's no different.
So that stillness is you being still within yourself for a while.
Definitely.
And that. So it's like a meditation.
Yeah, well, you know, it's approaching it like exactly your own kind of meditation. You know, I mean, I think I would never like to project, this is how I do it, you should do the same thing. It's just like, come on, take an element of what you think works for you, but you are you. You don't dress like me, you don't walk like me, you know what I mean? We may be the same, I don't know, shade, we may be the, height or same build, but actually, we're all different, you know what I mean? So. But
I think that what you're saying, to be that dynamic outward, you need to be going inside to kind of refuel yourself. So what you're following is a normal standard.
Yeah, well, I mean, see, for me, it's just normal.
Exactly. I work with people, so I see this when they out, and they come back in. And for someone who's watching this and they're trying to get into this type of industry, and they're outward. They probably will think that they have to be out on it all the time.
Well, this is why I differ. I shut down a lot. I don't even overexpose myself to go into too much galleries.
Right.
I don't overexpose myself by referencing magazines. I do look at magazines and I do go to shows, important. But it's not a be all and end all for me. And when I do go and I'm genuinely inspired by, it could be the greatest or the smallest things, I really appreciate it. I
think that's because you're looking from an eye that is not being influenced by advertising or trends. You can actually look like through the eyes of a child.
I think that's one of the things I try to preserve about my work. I try to, because I'm self-taught, and I really appreciate my work when I kind of stumble across so many things. And probably that was part of my early trauma working in my favour, and also against me sometimes. She brought to me like where everyone's trying to go high, she understood low.
Right.
And it's like microcosm to macrocosm.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So, but she did that in an effortless way. And not only that, the songs were amazing.
Yeah.
And she took that too. She's the first, I think, African lady to come and smash it in the BBC.
Yeah.
And around the world, and then her episode with Mjfontaine, all of this kind of thing for me was significant, and she brought that with a grace. So that was one. Photographically, Gordon Parks.
Okay. Yeah.
Gordon Parks for me. Again, he really hit a note for me because probably had a similar background as well. So that made it sort of like one reason, because I couldn't find anyone that really I could aspire to growing up in my creative world that I knew of. And when I learned that, not only was he a great photographer that used that tool to engage social dialogue.
Do
you know what I mean, right? Working for mainstream, media press, at the Times, and then from that, writing scores, directing, Superfly, you know what I mean? And, that to me just said, actually, why limit yourself? Not to say you spread yourself thin, because unfortunately, there's a time people try to say you're trying to do too much. Now, in the media or engagement, if you're not doing those things, then you're pretty much redundant. So it's very interesting, So we've been doing that for a very long time. So I say really, he was one of the original classics that took me into that space. And then another amazing. I call him a general in photography. Was Sido Kita. And Sido Kita was an old guy now, but he just photographed his village. That's what he did. He spent his time. I think it was in Senegal. He just photographed his village, and if you saw the images, the level. So basically, he's an old man now, and some curious gallery in France stumbled across some negatives and pictures. When they saw what the man had under his bed, I'm talking, you can't buy a picture for less than 10 grand. But again, the context of value and the context of what we do as visual artists, the context of and us understanding this and that's why I'm here, you know what I mean, to look at, how are we engaged in this, do you know what I mean, how are we collecting and how are we accrediting the creators, you know what I mean, while we're alive, because I think, we got caught up in this kind of idea and pursuing things which are kind of nearly superficial, or they limit themselves to that superficial sort of investment, not realizing that actually it's indelible if you understand that which is part of you. Do you know what I mean? And how that transcends the limitations of that thing that's going to wear out next month or next year. So I'm definitely about pushing that part of myself, because these guys have set the way. Some didn't know they were even doing it, but actually they set the tone. Do you know what I mean? And I think ultimately, as a creative person, the thing that is daunting is that you have responsibilities. I mean, that's like really daunting for a creative person. But you do, you have a voice, you know, and it's not about, just setting an agenda and that's what it's about. I think it's a cop out personally. You know, I think it's about being honest about your emotions. You know, when you're up, you're down, you're down. But you have a vehicle that can actually measure that or even reflect that. And others can have the same experience because it enables them and empowers them to do the same. So that's the affinity and the connection to the work.
It's interesting that others can have experience because it leads on to the next question. And what advice would you give to somebody starting out in this type of industry, film or photography? And what is it that you could have done better in hindsight?
Okay. The first thing I say to anybody who's starting off in the creative world is actually take a time out and walk around the business. Yeah. Actually understand the nature of the industry, right? Because it's not pretty. Yeah. And I think the sooner you overcome that, not to say don't get too engrossed in it, but it's actually take the time to appreciate some of the things that, once you get immersed in your creative world, you may not be able to appreciate because you'll be frustrated to do the two at the same time. And I think also it gives you a notion to prepare yourself, so you have that extra armor, so you understand that, there's a means to engage in and there's a means not to engage. However, what's key to any person pursuing the journey of creativity is to know themselves, get into that identity of you, whatever aspect of you think it's important that you want to really walk that journey with. Yeah. And that's not, it's easier said than done. But it's a necessity. I mean, that's what we're all aspiring to. I'm not there. I'm still aspiring to. Yeah. And my work kind of informs me. excuse me. My work kind of informs me. What state of evolution. I mean, today. Yeah.
That's creative energy, doesn't it? That kind of tells you what's going on with you. On a deeper level.
I saw Miss Dynamite this weekend. Oh God, man, Miss Dynamite. There's one woman act. I'm thinking, this lady has really stood the test of time. And the fans were like new fans, young kids. And, but it was just the love in the space because she was admitting that. And she was allowing other people to share that. And the beats were dirty, it was some reggae riffs were kicking in. So she wasn't trying to compromise it at all. She just being about the consistency. And I think for me, I see my images, I see my work as that baseline, and some people it is intimidating because they're not seeing it every day. Yeah. I've just challenged the kind of the stereotype or the mythical scenario, and again, it's important that we have these opportunities to disperse the myth. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm a guy, I bleed, I cry, I have woman trouble, I have life, yeah? However, within that process, we're still learning. Yeah. And, I think we can all learn together. Yeah. I think creativity is one of the most unique catalyst art form there is for us to actually explore ourselves. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And why not? And then there's no limitation for my work. If you've seen the work, I want to challenge.
Is that because you immerse yourself in that that energy, that creative energy? You just immerse yourself without even thinking about. I mean, your negative self-talk must be minimal when you're working because you just go for it.
Oh, that's actually when you actually in the creative. When I'm actually in the doing, it's the ultimate high. I could live there. Yeah, right? But you realize you can't. You burn yourself out. So what it is, you have to appreciate the journey. Yeah. So every day now, there's little things that happen, and I kind of just smile to myself because I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful. I actually see that. I stop and look at it. Yeah. Where some people just walk on by.
Or they can have a negative self-talk that make them doubt their work.
Yeah. Well, I think we all have negative self-talk. It's a question of what do we do with it. Yeah. Because there's negative and there's positive. So that's a challenge. And I'm like, I charge myself. So I'm like, well, if you're gonna be giving me some, as Jamaican they say, duppy talk, then I said get behind me because I'm moving forward. Thank you.
That's really important.
Thank you for but if you're negative, I'm accentuating this positive from that scenario. Right. So otherwise, we could take a long conversation about the histories and the pains and the traumas and all this stuff, and it's all relevant. I think we need to own that. And once we own it, we can transcend it.
Right.
All right, and all my work is there serving is to say, well, look, here's transcendental, here's transitions, and here's me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You know, and I think once we kind of see that process, you know, we can do anything we want with that.
So it's basically walking around the industry, looking at the industry, going for it, ignoring the negative self-talk, basically.
Well, no, put it into context.
Yeah,
don't ignore, because ignore is denial. Right? I believe that we need to put it into context, right, and then own it.
Okay.
You know, own your space and, you know, occupy your space. You know what I mean?
But
you
focus
know?
more on what's it in front of you.
What's it getting you to? What's the point? You know, I mean, critique is a negative noise. Yeah. But actually, that's my best friend, whether I like it or not, because it's their opinion, you know. And actually, I'm thinking, thank you. I never see it like that. I never, you know, you allowed me to see something that I didn't see. I don't necessarily agree with you.
But some dreams are killed before I even get to. When I was studying art,
there's a difference there.
You know, a lot of dreams are killed before.
See,
this is why this is important.
Keep your dream to yourself. Let them manifest.
Okay.
Okay, you don't go throw your pearl under the swine's feet because it will be trampled to ground.
And that's the problem with a lot of... I was speaking to my young nephew and he was saying, you know, Auntie, I just want to do this. I said, well, just deal with it. Because, and it's our own caregivers at a fair that may stop us from wanting to pursue a dream. So it is keeping it, basically... Because they can actually look and see what you're doing and think, well, it's wise advice from somebody who's not doing it or not taking a step outside.
I'll give you an example. I actually did a piece called The Dreamer. And it was inspired by a book I was reading about from Carlos Castaneda, based on Don Juan, and worked with this really young designer, beautiful guy, Jason. And when we produced the piece, you know, he was blind. Jason was blind to what I was doing. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? But I was, again, intuitively just guided into this process. Mm-hmm. And one of the conditions I had with the curator, Editorial, so it's at the Wallsall Gallery, this is years ago, 1978 or something like that. 1998. No, excuse me. Was it 1998 or 2001? 2001, sorry.
Okay.
Right? So anyhow, one of the conditions was that I was not going to publicize the piece in advance. And it would not be unveiled on the night. You know, so that way, I wanted people to trust their own experiences rather than, you know, having to always selling the work. Yeah. Because I always felt that's robbing the artist. Because they were asking me questions that actually I didn't have the answer to. Yeah. I was still in the moment. I was still trying to get to the moment. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So when we did finally present the work, it was amazing. I mean, people actually started to express the concept of their dream on the night. I mean, I had to leave the gallery. It was that much coming at me. Wow. You know, and I thought I'd never seen that experience, let alone had that experience myself. And I think that's what people are at. Yeah. I think that's what people are at, you know. So definitely don't go giving away your dream willy-nilly. You know, without you seeing that person that's applying their dream, you know, then you can share that because you can see the affinity. But, you know, keep it focused and just like, you know, stop trying to be like someone else. That's
really important, authenticity. Okay, so we're coming to a close now. It's been really informative and we can talk forever.
It's gone like really fast.
But can you tell us where you're going to be? I'm going to put, we're obviously going to put your website and everything up, but just tell us what's next for you and where can people reach you?
Well, I mean, the website is the easiest place because there's my email there, kofikamara@gmail.com. Okay. You know, Kamarazi, kofiallen.weebly.com, excuse that long one, but it's temporary for now, but it will be updated and it'll be notifying public galleries. And, you know, the next stage is really about, you know, I'm looking to do more bespoke work with private clients. You know, I still work commercially, but I think there's a growth process here. And I think the work is lending itself more towards people who are reaching out and want to explore their story. They want to invest in themselves. Do you know what I mean? You know, we're living in a time where, you know, we've all watched, you know, in this, what's the word, a time of austerity, where, you know, people have got their money in a bank and they've just had 40% of that money taken from them. And, you know, you'll have to ask, well, what can I invest my money in?
That's right, yeah.
You know, and, you know, unfortunately, culture is the last thing. Yeah, we live in a time of austerity where, you know, people have their money invested in banks and, you know, the governments are saying, I'm going to come and take 40% or 20% or 30% out of it. And, you know, you ask yourself then, what's safe? Do you know what I mean? And for me, a lot of people don't realise that art is one of the most consistent process of investment. So and I think I want the ordinary person to be able to afford some of these collections.
Yeah, that's
Do you know what I mean?
important,
Because maybe they pull buy or they buy and we pay the payoff scheme or whatever. But I think I want to make I'm open to have the conversation as long as they're serious.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be taken for a ride. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but at the same time, I want to meet them halfway and build that relationship with clients, because people are growing. We go through, we don't go for ups and downs. We go through cycles.
Yeah.
So I believe that if we help each other through the cycle, when we get back to that point of reference, art is one of the things that I use as my reference, like a mantra.
Well, it does affect your house. When you have art around your house, it does have an effect on your home. So you're buying really an effect. You want to set a scene, you want to set a mood. You can actually change how people think by the type of art that you have in your house, the impact it could have on your family. So it's not really just about having a picture; it's an investment.
It's just, I think it's important.
An identity.
It's important. It tells a story. I mean, in America, you find that there's really serious art collections going on. I mean, you would surprise Swiss Beats. Damien Dash, I mean, these guys are collectors. Jay-Z, they're all collectors, they've got galleries. I mean, Russell Simmons' brother owns a gallery, they understand, Ronnie Woods from the Beatles, for Rolling Stones, sorry, he's got a gallery in Berkeley Square. I mean, there's this huge industry. And we need to get behind that industry. We need to get behind the creatives. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of it's on the PR marketing side. But I think we get to that point of people recognising what the talent is, and if they can recognise the talent, I think we're going in the right direction.
Well, I think these types of videos and series and shows will inform people that, actually I can buy art, I can do this, I am interested in this artist. And I think that's where we have to change it, by getting...
and overcoming this fight, because a lot of people look at the work and they'll say to me, "Oh, Kofi, that's, are you just too expensive?" And I'm just saying to them, actually, come on, let's have a conversation and let's work it out. Let's find a way. Let's be real. If you can't buy that, then look, let's work with what you can buy. But let's build. Because we're on a journey. It's not one off. I'm here, and so forth. So if I'm not here, then you go talk to some other person who's going to be hitting the price, and I can't negotiate. So while I'm here, I'm trying to give people the opportunity.
That's fantastic. Okay, we've come to the end now.
Well, thank you very much again, and for all the Mjfontaine beautiful fans out there, thank you for listening.
Next month we'll have Fia Yurfisa with her new book, Growing Into Myself. See you then.